Her hands trembled slightly, though she tried to hide it even from herself. Tonight was the annual corporate gala for Dennis's advertising agency. His agency, his success, his night. She, as usual, was just an accessory to the picture. Hanging in the closet was that navy blue dress, elegant and severe, the one Dennis had once approved of with the words, "It's fine." Understated, Kate ran a hand over the fabric, feeling the cool silk beneath her fingers. The dress was beautiful, expensive, but utterly impersonal, much like she herself had become in recent years. Dennis's voice carried from the bathroom. "Kate, are you almost ready? We have to leave in 30. I don't want to be late. It's an important night, you understand?" "Yes, almost done," she called back, pulling the dress over her head and zipping it up the side. An important night for him. Dennis's agency had just closed a massive contract with an international corporation, the culmination of 6 months of negotiations, presentations, and frayed nerves. And now, the triumph. Kate knew that tonight her husband would be the center of attention, accepting congratulations, shining, and recounting his achievements. She would stand beside him, smiling and nodding when someone politely asked, "And what do you do?" And what would she say? "I'm a stay-at-home wife. I'm Dennis's wife." 20 years ago, she'd had her own plans. Kate had graduated summa cum laude from Pratt Institute with a degree in interior design. She dreamed of opening her own studio, of creating spaces where people felt truly at home. But then she met Dennis, an ambitious, energetic marketing student at NYU, and fell head over heels. He'd told her then that they would build a life together, that he believed in her talent, that he would support all her endeavors. For the first few years, he did. They rented a tiny studio apartment in Queens, both of them working. Dennis was starting his career at a small ad agency. Kate got a job as an assistant to a designer. In the evenings, they'd sit in their cramped kitchen, drinking cheap wine and dreaming about the future. Dennis would hold her and whisper, "We can do anything, Kate. You'll see. In 10 years, you'll have your own studio, and I'll have my own agency." But life had other plans. Dennis's career took off at lightning speed. He proved to be a gifted negotiator, adept at finding clients, persuading, and selling ideas. Within 5 years, he was head of his department, and 3 years after that, he opened his own agency. The money started pouring in. They moved into a spacious condo in Midtown, bought a luxury car, and started vacationing in the Caribbean. And somewhere in that whirlwind, Kate's dreams simply dissolved. First, Dennis asked her to help with the paperwork for his new agency. "Kate, honey, you're home anyway. You have more time." Then it was organizing meetings, finding an office space, and designing that very office. Kate worked for free for her husband, for their shared future. That's what she told herself. Then, one evening, Dennis said, "Listen, maybe you should just stop working altogether. Why do you need to be running around to other people's apartments with a tape measure? We have enough money. You should focus on the house, on yourself. I want the wife of a successful businessman to look the part, not like some frumpy, overworked woman." At the time, his words had sounded like he was caring for her. Kate agreed. She quit her job and, without noticing it, transformed into a beautiful accessory for Dennis's life. She managed the household, cooked gourmet dinners, went to the gym, the spa, and the salon. She greeted him with a smile after work, never argued, never objected. She was convenient. Dennis walked into the bedroom, fastening the cufflinks on his crisp white shirt. He looked magnificent. The expensive suit fit his toned physique perfectly. His hair was impeccably styled, a faint scent of cologne hanging in the air. At 45, he possessed the polished, confident handsomeness of a successful man. "Oh, you're wearing that dress," he grunted, glancing at his wife. "Well, okay, it's fine. Just don't overdo it with the makeup, and try not to look bored tonight, all right? There will be important people there. I don't want them thinking my wife is dying of boredom at my company's events." Kate swallowed the lump in her throat and nodded. Words like that used to hurt. Now, she just let them pass by like annoying background noise. The restaurant hosting the gala was one of the most exclusive in the city. Panoramic windows offered a glittering view of the Manhattan skyline, and the lighting was soft and flattering. Waiters in white gloves moved silently between impeccably set tables. The guests were already gathering, about 30 people, agency employees with their spouses, a few key clients, and partners, all dressed up, animated, with glasses of champagne in their hands. Dennis immediately plunged into the crowd, shaking hands, hugging colleagues, laughing, and accepting congratulations. Kate stayed close by, smiling when required, and answering polite questions. The wife of a magazine's editor-in-chief, a plump woman in her 50s, asked, "Kate, darling, what do you do? Are you in advertising as well?" "No, I'm a stay-at-home wife," Kate replied, the words practiced and smooth. "Oh, how wonderful! That means you have time for your home, your garden. I haven't worked for the last 10 years myself. And it's such a blessing not being tied to a schedule, doing whatever you want." Kate nodded, but a cold shudder ran through her. Doing whatever you want. She couldn't remember the last time she'd done what she wanted, and not what Dennis needed or what was convenient for the household. At the table, Dennis was seated at the head, with Kate beside him. He was in his element, telling jokes, entertaining the guests with anecdotes from his work, and sharing stories about difficult clients. Everyone laughed, hanging on his every word. Kate sat silently, sipping her champagne and smiling at the appropriate moments. The director of the agency, a large, gray-haired man with a booming voice, stood up with his glass. "Friends, tonight we're celebrating not just a successful deal, but a true breakthrough for our agency. And it's all thanks to the talent, persistence, and incredible charisma of our Dennis. Let's drink to him." Everyone cheered, applauded, and turned to Dennis. He stood up, feigning modesty, but his eyes shone with pleasure. Thank you, friends," he began, and Kate felt something inside her tighten. She knew this tone. He was about to put on a show, say all the right things, and everyone would be captivated. Success is always a team effort. Without you guys, I couldn't have achieved any of this. You're the best team anyone could ask for. Applause, murmurs of approval. Dennis paused, looked around the room, and then his gaze landed on Kate. Something mocking flickered in his eyes. Suddenly, Kate knew. Something was wrong. She felt it in her gut. A chill ran down her spine. "And one more thing," Dennis continued, a smirk widening on his face. "I want to raise a glass to my wife, to my Kate." He raised his glass higher, and everyone turned to her. "To my youthful mistake." The room erupted in laughter, loud, genuine, cheerful. Someone whooped, someone else clapped. Dennis beamed, clearly proud of his witticism. He looked at Kate, expecting her to laugh along, to support the joke, as she always did. She always supported his jokes, even when they were at her expense. But this time, something inside Kate didn't just bend, it shattered, like thin ice underfoot. She sat with a frozen smile on her face as an icy coldness spread through her body. A youthful mistake. That's what he had called her, in front of everyone, his colleagues, his partners, strangers. 20 years of marriage. 20 years of her giving up her dreams for his career. 20 years of her forgiving his affairs. Yes, she knew about the assistant 3 years ago, and the client he'd traveled with on that business trip. 20 years of pretending not to notice how his respect for her dwindled, how he increasingly saw her as just a beautiful piece of furniture in their home, and now a youthful mistake. Kate raised her own glass, her smile unwavering. No one noticed that it didn't reach her eyes. She drank the champagne down to the last drop, the bubbles stinging her throat, and the physical discomfort seemed to sober her completely. The dinner continued. Dennis, pleased with himself, kept joking and accepting compliments. A few times, he patted Kate on the shoulder, as if she were a dog. "Don't be upset, it was just a joke." She nodded and smiled. Inside her, a strange detachment was growing. It felt as if she were watching the entire scene from outside her own body. A young employee, a vibrant woman in her 20s with bright, eager eyes, leaned over to Kate and whispered, "Don't pay him any mind. Men, they just don't think before they speak. My husband says stuff like that sometimes, and then wonders why I'm mad." Kate looked at her young, full of plans, undoubtedly building her own career. Her whole life was ahead of her. And suddenly, Kate saw herself 20 years ago, just as naive, just as in love, ready to do anything for a man. An unbearable wave of pity for that younger version of herself washed over her. "Thank you," she replied quietly to the girl. "It's fine." But nothing was fine. Something had broken inside her for good. The evening dragged on endlessly. Kate mechanically ate, drank, and answered questions. At one point, Dennis got absorbed in a conversation with a partner about a new project, and Kate slipped out onto the restaurant's balcony for some air. The city lights glittered below, and a cool wind whipped through her hair. She stood, gripping the railing, and wondered when it had all changed. When, exactly, had she stopped being a person to Dennis and become just another part of his successful life? When had he started allowing himself these barbs, these dismissive remarks? And most importantly, when had she started allowing him to treat her this way? Kate remembered how, a year ago, she'd wanted to sign up for design courses to get back into her profession. Dennis had laughed. "What do you need that for? You haven't worked in 20 years. Who's going to hire you? You'd be better off hitting the gym. You've put on a little weight lately." She had stayed silent then and didn't sign up. She went to the gym instead. She remembered how, 6 months ago, she'd suggested they take a weekend trip to the Catskills, just the two of them, like they used to. Dennis had brushed her off. "I don't have time for romance right now. I have a project on fire. Besides, what would we even do there? You're not the same girl who could sleep in a tent anymore." Each time, she had swallowed the hurt, convincing herself that these were minor things, that the family and their stability were what mattered, that all couples went through this. But tonight, a youthful mistake, that was the final straw. She returned to the dining room. Dennis hadn't even noticed she was gone. Kate sat down, finished her champagne, and was suddenly struck by a strange sense of calm. The decision had formed, final and irrevocable. She wouldn't make a scene. She wouldn't scream, or cry, or demand an apology. It was all pointless. Dennis wouldn't change. He genuinely didn't understand that he'd done anything wrong. To him, she really was a mistake he'd long grown tired of, but divorcing her would be inconvenient and unprofitable. Well then, she would show him just what kind of mistake she was. The gala ended after midnight. Dennis, quite drunk and satisfied, chattered all the way home. "Did you see how well that went? Fantastic. I feel like this contract is our ticket to Europe. We might even open an office there. Can you imagine, Kate? Are you listening?" "Yes, I'm listening," she answered quietly, staring out the window at the passing city lights. "And don't pout about the toast. It was a joke. Everyone was laughing. Have you completely lost your sense of humor?" Kate remained silent. "Sense of humor? No, Dennis. You just stopped being funny a long, long time ago." At home, he barely made it to the bedroom before collapsing onto the bed, fully dressed. A minute later, he was snoring. Kate stood in the doorway, looking at him, at this stranger she had lived with for 20 years, and felt nothing. Not love, not hatred, not even hurt. Just emptiness. She turned and walked to the kitchen. She put the kettle on, took out her favorite mug with the blue forget-me-nots, another gift from her mother, and sat down at the table. The apartment was quiet, except for the ticking of the wall clock and the hum of the kettle, and Kate began to plan. She sat in the kitchen, her hands wrapped around a hot mug of chamomile tea. The clock on the wall read 1:30 a.m. From the bedroom, the steady sound of Dennis's snoring echoed. He was dead to the world, as always after drinking. Normally, on nights like these, Kate would have gone to bed too, swallowing her resentment and telling herself that tomorrow would be better. But not tonight. Tonight, she felt a strange clarity in her mind, as if a fog that had clouded her vision for years had suddenly lifted. A youthful mistake. The words echoed in her ears, but they no longer caused pain. They had become a catalyst, the trigger for something that should have happened a long time ago. Kate sipped her tea, set the mug down, and opened her laptop. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. She logged into their online banking. The joint account, where Dennis deposited money for household expenses, glowed with a substantial sum. He loved to control the finances, giving her a card with a limit and checking her spending every month. "Where did $2,000 go? What are you spending so much on?" Those conversations happened regularly, and Kate would justify her expenses like a schoolgirl in front of the principal. But what Dennis didn't know was that the account held more than just his money. 3 years ago, Kate's grandmother had passed away and left her an inheritance, a small apartment in an older part of the city. Kate had sold it, and the money, nearly $150,000, she'd deposited into their joint account for the down payment on the very condo they now lived in. Dennis had said at the time, "Great, we'll put it toward our home. It's all ours anyway." Ours. But the condo was registered in his name alone. Kate smirked. How blind she had been. For how many years had she let him make decisions for her, control her money, her time, her life? She opened a new browser tab and went to the website of a different bank, where, a month ago, as if sensing something, she had opened an account in her own name. Back then, it was just a vague desire to have something of her own, something independent. Now, it was a life raft. Kate double-checked the account details, then returned to the joint account and began transferring the money. Not all at once, that would raise red flags with the bank. First, $30,000. She confirmed the transaction via a text code, then another $20,000, then $40,000, transfer after transfer, methodically, calmly. Her hands didn't shake, her heart beat steadily. Within an hour, she had moved nearly $200,000. In the morning, Dennis would discover the empty account and, of course, rush to the bank, screaming and demanding his money back. But the transactions were legal, made from an account she had full access to, into an account opened in her own name. No fraud involved. Kate closed the laptop and finished her cooled tea. Then she stood and went into the small room Dennis called his study. His massive desk and leather chair dominated the space. On the shelves, rows of books on marketing and business which he never read were arranged for show. A safe was built into the wall. Kate knew the combination. Of course, she did. Dennis was narcissistic but predictable. The code was their wedding date, June 15th, 0615. The very date he had publicly called a youthful mistake. She entered the numbers. The safe clicked open. Inside were neat stacks of cash. Dennis always kept cash on hand, never fully trusting banks. Kate counted it about $50,000. She took it all. Then she pulled out documents, contracts, stock certificates, bonds. She scanned them quickly and stuffed everything into a large envelope. At the bottom of the safe lay a velvet box. Kate opened it. Gold cufflinks, a gift from Dennis's father before he died. Dennis never wore them but cherished them as a memento. Kate hesitated for a second, then took them too. Let him feel what it's like to lose something precious. She closed the safe, reset the combination, and left the study. Next, the papers. Kate went to the large cabinet in the living room where they stored files. Methodically, she sorted through them. Their marriage certificate, her passport, the documents for the condo. There they were, the deed of sale. The property was in the name of Dennis Gromov, but attached to the contract was an addendum. A bank statement showing that an initial down payment of $150,000 had been made from the account of Catherine Gromov, her grandmother's money. Kate photographed every page on her phone, then placed the originals in her folder. In a divorce, these documents would be her trump card. Next, bank statements from the last 3 years. Kate found the folder and flipped through them. There they were, regular transfers. A sum of $2,000 sent every month for the past year and a half to an account she didn't recognize. Kate smirked. So the affair hadn't started 3 years ago as she'd thought, but 18 months ago, and he was supporting his mistress, with their joint money. She photographed the statements. Proof of adultery would play a role in the division of assets. In the corner of the cabinet was another folder, worn and old. Kate pulled it out and opened it. Photographs. Their youth. Here they were with Dennis in their first year of college, both of them laughing, hugging by a fountain. Here was their wedding, a tiny affair with only close friends. Kate in a simple white dress, Dennis in a suit with a skinny tie, both deliriously happy. Here was their first apartment, sitting on the floor amidst boxes, drinking champagne from plastic cups. When had it all changed? Kate looked at the photos and couldn't pinpoint the breaking point. Maybe there wasn't one. Maybe it happened gradually. With each of his successes, each new promotion, each expensive suit, he rose higher and higher. She stayed in the same place, and at some point, he had started looking down on her. Kate slammed the folder shut. She didn't need these photos. The past had died tonight, in that restaurant, along with his toast. The clock showed 3 a.m. Dennis was asleep. Kate returned to the kitchen and opened her laptop again. She went to an airline's website. A ticket. Where to? Far away from here. Somewhere no one knew her, where she could start over. Milan. For some reason, that name popped into her head. Kate had always dreamed of seeing Italy, its architecture, its beauty. Dennis had promised to take her, but there was always something, an important meeting, a project. The dream had remained just a dream. Kate found a flight for that morning at 8 a.m. A direct flight. One ticket, business class. The cost, $1,200. Expensive. Let him pay for it. She used his credit card, the one linked to their joint account. She clicked Book, entered Dennis's card information. The payment went through. The ticket was purchased. The flight was in 5 hours. Next, housing. Kate went to an apartment rental site and selected Milan. She scrolled through options, small studios, apartments, rooms. She settled on a cozy apartment in the city center, not far from the Duomo. A month's rent, €2,000. Pricey, but beautiful. She booked it, again paying with Dennis's card. Kate leaned back in her chair. It was settled. In a few hours, she would be flying to a new life. But first, she had to pack. She walked into the bedroom. Dennis was lying on his side, his arms flung out. His mouth was slightly open, an expression of complete satisfaction on his face. Kate paused at the door, looking at him. 20 years, half her life. She had loved this man, given him her youth, her career, her dreams, and he had called her a mistake. No, Dennis, the marriage wasn't the mistake. The mistake was tolerating your disrespect for so long. Kate quietly walked to the closet and pulled out a small suitcase. She packed sparingly, taking only the essentials. A few changes of clothes, underwear, a toiletry bag, her documents, passport, all the condo papers, the bank statements, photos of the documents on her phone, her laptop, chargers, and her mother's earrings, the same pearl drops she had worn tonight. A photograph of her mother was the only personal item she kept separately. Nothing else. Clothes could be bought. Things didn't matter. Freedom did. Kate zipped the suitcase, carried it to the entryway, and returned to the kitchen. She looked at the clock. 3:30 a.m. 3.5 hours until her flight. She would call a car for 6. The ride to the airport would take about 40 minutes. She sat down at the table and poured herself more tea. Her hands were steady, her thoughts clear. In a single night, a whole life could crumble. And strangely, it didn't hurt. It felt liberating. Kate thought back over the past few years. How Dennis had started staying late at work more often. How he'd stopped asking about her day, her mood. How he'd forgotten her birthday last year, just completely forgot. He came home late, and when she gently reminded him, he waved it away. Sorry, I was swamped. We'll celebrate this weekend. They never did. How, 6 months ago, she'd gotten sick, a bad flu, a high fever. Dennis left for a business trip without even calling to check on her. Kate lay alone in the empty apartment, taking medicine, mustering the last of her strength to make herself some soup. She got better on her own. When he returned a week later, he asked casually, "So, you're all better?" and went about his business. But years ago, he would have brought her orange juice, tucked her in with a blanket, and sat beside her, reading aloud. When they were students and she had tonsillitis, Dennis hadn't left her bedside in the dorm for 3 days, making her tea with honey and bringing her medicine. She had been important then. She had been the meaning of his life, not a mistake. What happened to that Dennis? Or had he always been this way, just hiding it behind the mask of a love-struck student? Kate shook her head. It didn't matter. The past couldn't be changed. Only the future could. She stood up and walked through the apartment. The living room, with its expensive furniture that Dennis had chosen without consulting her. The paintings on the walls, modern art she couldn't stand but he had insisted on. The kitchen, with its state-of-the-art appliances she rarely used because Dennis preferred takeout. The bedroom with its enormous bed where they had long slept like strangers, each on their own side. This wasn't her home. It was just an expensive box where she existed, but didn't live. Kate went into the bathroom and looked at herself in the mirror. Her face was tired but calm. Her eyes held a new resolve. She opened her makeup bag and took out a red lipstick, a bright, bold shade she had bought a year ago but never used because Dennis had said, "What are you doing? Trying to look like a hooker. Wear normal colors." Kate applied the lipstick bright, defiant red. She looked at her reflection and smiled. "That's better." Then she turned to the large mirror on the wall and wrote in bold letters, "Mistake corrected." A perfect message. Concise. Clear. Kate returned to the kitchen and checked the time. 5 a.m. It was time. She requested an Uber through her app, setting the destination to JFK Airport. The car would arrive in 15 minutes. While she waited, Kate gathered the last few items. The keys to his car, a silver sedan he'd bought last year and doted on like a child. Kate took the keys and the car title, let him search for them later. The documents from the safe, all neatly placed in her folder. Cash in her purse, laptop, phone, chargers, everything she needed was with her. Kate walked through the apartment one last time, pausing at the bedroom door. Dennis was still sleeping, just as blissfully unaware. He had no idea that in a few hours his world would be turned upside down. "Goodbye, Dennis," Kate thought. "And thank you for the lesson. You taught me what no woman should ever have to tolerate, and I've finally learned it." She turned, walked to the console table in the entryway, and took off her wedding ring, gold, with a small diamond. Once, it had seemed a symbol of eternal love. Now, it was just a piece of metal. Kate placed the ring on the table next to the apartment keys. Her phone buzzed with a notification. Her Uber had arrived. Kate put on her coat, picked up her suitcase and purse, and opened the door. It was still dark outside, but the eastern sky was beginning to lighten. A new day, a new life. Kate stepped out of the apartment, quietly pulled the door shut, and walked down the stairs, avoiding the elevator to prevent any noise. An Uber was waiting at the curb. The driver, a middle-aged man, got out to help with her suitcase. "JFK, right?" "Yes," Kate said, sliding into the back seat. The car pulled away. Kate looked back at their building. The windows were dark. Somewhere up there, on the 4th floor, her former life was sleeping, and she was driving toward a new one. The city was still asleep. Empty streets, a few scattered cars, streetlights glowing in the pre-dawn gloom. The car moved smoothly over the asphalt, and Kate watched the city go by, feeling lighter with every mile that passed. The driver was silent, not bothering her with questions, for which she was grateful. At one point he asked, "Leaving for long?" Kate paused, then replied, "Forever." "I see." The driver nodded and said no more. They reached the airport quickly. There was no traffic at this hour. Kate paid, took her suitcase, and walked into the terminal. It was sparsely populated, only travelers with early flights. She went to the check-in counter, presented her passport and ticket. The young woman behind the desk smiled. "Business class to Milan. Boarding in an hour and a half. Are you checking any bags?" "No, carry-on only." Kate received her boarding pass, went through security, and found a seat in the waiting area by a window. Outside, the sky was brightening. Dawn was breaking. Kate took out her phone and checked the time. 6:30 a.m. Dennis was still asleep. He'd probably wake up around 10. He'd go to the kitchen for coffee, notice she was gone. At first, he'd think she just went to the store. Then he'd see the note on the mirror, then the empty safe, then the zero balance in their account. Kate smirked. It would be interesting to see the look on his face. She opened her contacts, found Dennis's number, hesitated for a second, and then blocked him. The connection was severed. The flight was announced at 7:30. Kate stood up and walked to the gate. One last look at her home city through the panoramic window. The city was waking up, A normal day was beginning for millions of people. But for her, this day was the beginning of a completely new life. Kate boarded the plane and settled into a comfortable window seat. A flight attendant brought her a glass of champagne, a pre-departure perk in business class. Kate took the glass and had a small sip. The bubbles tickled her tongue. She looked out the window as the plane taxied and then began to accelerate down the runway. The city fell away below, growing smaller and smaller. Goodbye, old life, Kate thought. And hello, new one. I don't know what you'll be like, but you certainly can't be any worse than the last. The plane soared into the sky, and Kate leaned back in her seat, closing her eyes. For the first time in many years, she felt truly free. Dennis opened his eyes and immediately squeezed them shut. His head was splitting. His mouth was as dry as a desert. He groaned, rolled onto his back, and ran a hand over his face. A hangover. A vicious, nauseating hangover. How much had he drunk last night? Champagne, then whiskey. He seemed to recall someone pouring him cognac, too. He pried one eye open and looked at the clock on the nightstand. 11:45 a.m. Damn, he'd overslept. But what did it matter? It was Saturday. He could afford to sleep in after the gala. The gala. It had been great. He was the center of attention. Everyone congratulating him, admiring his success. That toast to the contract, the applause. Dennis smiled at the memory. Yes, he knew how to make an impression. He needed to get up, drink some water, find an aspirin. He struggled to a sitting position, rubbing his temples. His head throbbed. He glanced at the other side of the bed. Empty. Kate must be up already, probably in the kitchen making breakfast. Though usually, she would have come in to check on him, offered him something for his hangover. Not today, apparently. Dennis stood up and staggered to the bathroom. He splashed cold water on his face. It helped a little. He looked at himself in the mirror, face puffy, eyes red, stubble. He looked terrible. He needed to pull himself together. He glanced up at the mirror and froze. Written across the glass in bright red lipstick were two words, "Mistake corrected." Dennis stared at the inscription, completely bewildered. What the hell was this? Was Kate trying to be funny? He ran a finger over the letters. The lipstick was fresh, not yet dry. Strange. Kate never wrote on mirrors, and she hadn't been in a joking mood lately. "Kate!" he yelled, walking out of the bathroom. "Where are you? What's with the childish prank on the mirror?" Silence. No answer. "Kate!" Dennis repeated, louder this time, walking down the hall. Still silence. The apartment was completely still. No footsteps, no running water, no TV. A strange, oppressive emptiness filled the air. Dennis walked into the kitchen. Empty. No breakfast. The coffee wasn't made. Kate's forget-me-not mug was on the table, empty and clean, nothing else. "Kate, stop messing around!" Dennis felt irritation starting to boil inside him. "Where are you?" He went into the living room. Empty. Back to the bedroom, only he had slept there. Her side of the bed was untouched, so she either never came to bed or got up extremely early. Dennis returned to the entryway to check if her shoes and coat were there, and that's when he noticed it. On the console table lay her wedding ring, the gold band with the small diamond, sitting right next to the apartment keys. He picked up the ring and turned it over in his fingers. His heart skipped a beat. What was going on? "Why is this here, Kate?" Dennis shouted, a note of panic in his voice now. "This isn't funny. Come out." Silence. He grabbed his phone from the nightstand in the bedroom, turned it on, and dialed Kate's number. It rang and rang, then went to voicemail. "The subscriber you have dialed is not available." He called again. Same thing, one more time. Voicemail again. He started calling her old number, one she kept as a backup. No answer. Panic was mounting. He paced the apartment, trying to make sense of it. He opened the closet in the bedroom. Her clothes were there, dresses hanging, shoes lined up. So she hadn't left. Or... Dennis yanked open the top shelf of the closet where her small suitcase was usually stored. Empty. The suitcase was gone. He froze. The suitcase was gone, but her clothes were here. What did she take? Dennis ran to the living room, to the large cabinet with their documents. He opened it and began frantically sorting through the folders. Their marriage certificate gone, Kate's passport gone, the deed to the condo gone, Damn it, damn it, damn it. Dennis threw an empty folder on the floor. His hands were shaking. He sprinted to his study. The safe. He had to check the safe. His fingers trembled as he fumbled with the combination, getting it wrong twice. Finally, he entered it correctly. A click. The door swung open. Empty. Completely empty. The cash was gone. The documents were gone. Even his father's cufflinks, the gold ones he cherished as a memory, were gone. Dennis stood before the open safe, a cold dread washing over him. This was impossible. It couldn't be happening. Kate couldn't have. She didn't even know the combination. Or did she? He grabbed his phone and dialed his friend and business partner, Andrew. "Hello? Den? How's the head?" A sleepy voice answered. "Andrew, did you see Kate when she left the gala last night?" "Kate? We all left together, remember? You were hammered. I put you both in a cab around 2 a.m., I think. Was she with me?" "Of course she was. Sat right next to you, quiet the whole way. You really don't remember anything?" Dennis hung up without saying goodbye. So, she was with him last night. They came home together. He fell asleep, and she... What did she do? Dennis ran back to the living room and turned on his laptop. His fingers drummed on the desk as the computer booted up. "Come on! Come on!" Finally, the screen lit up. Dennis logged into his online banking, entered the password. The page for their joint account loaded. Balance, $123.47. Dennis stared at the number. $123. There had been over $200,000 in there. He'd checked it himself before the gala yesterday. His hands started shaking even more violently. He clicked on the transaction history and froze. Wire transfer, $30,000. Time, 1:47 a.m. Wire transfer, $20,000. Time, 1:52 a.m. Wire transfer, $40,000. Time, 2:03 a.m. Another transfer, and another, and another. Dozens of them, one after the other. To account of Catherine Gromov. The last transfer was at 3:15 a.m. After that, a charge for an airline ticket. Business class, $1,200. Then a charge for an apartment rental in Milan, $2,200. Dennis couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The numbers, letters, and dates swam before his eyes. She took all the money, all of it, and she flew to Milan. "No," he whispered. "No, this is impossible." He grabbed his phone and started dialing Kate's number again. Voicemail, voicemail, voicemail. Dennis dialed the bank's customer service line. After a long hold and an automated menu, he barked into the phone. "Representative." Finally, a woman's voice. "Capital Bank, how can I help you?" "My wife stole $200,000 from my account," Dennis screamed. "I want the money back immediately." "Please calm down, sir. Can you provide the account number and your security keyword?" He rattled them off, choking with rage. There was a pause, the sound of typing. "Yes, I see the transactions, sir. A series of transfers were made to an account opened in the name of Catherine V. Gromov. The transactions are legitimate, confirmed by SMS security codes." "What do you mean, legitimate? She stole my money." "I'm sorry, sir, but the account was joint. Mrs. Gromov had full access. She had the right to perform any transactions. Everything was done within legal guidelines. I demand you reverse the transfers." "Unfortunately, that's impossible. The transactions have been completed, and the funds have been credited to the other account. If you have a claim, you can pursue it in court." "In court?" Dennis nearly suffocated. "Are you kidding me? I'm sorry, sir, but there's nothing more we can do. Have a good day." The line went dead. Dennis threw his phone onto the couch. He paced the room in circles, clutching his head. Think, what do I do? He snatched up the phone again and started calling friends. First, Max, a buddy from college. "Max, have you seen Kate? Has she called you by any chance?" "Kate? No. What's wrong?" She's missing. I can't find her." "Missing? Did you call the police?" "No, I don't know. She left. She took the money, the documents." "Wait, so she's not missing, she left you?" "I don't know. Maybe. Have you seen her or not?" "No, Dennis, I haven't. Look, maybe you two just had a fight. It'll blow over. Dennis hung up. He called others. No one knew anything. They were all surprised, confused. When he called his mother, she gasped. Kate left? Denny? Did you do something to upset her? Upset her, Mom. She stole all our money and ran away. People don't just run away for no reason, son. Something must have happened. Think back. Did you two argue? No. Everything was fine. We were at my company gala last night. Everything went great. Well, just calm down. Maybe she just went away to cool off. Call her in a couple of days. Talk it out calmly. Dennis disconnected. Cool off. $200,000 and a one-way ticket to Milan wasn't cooling off. He sat down on the couch, burying his face in his hands. His head was splitting even worse now. The hangover, mixed with shock, was becoming unbearable pain. The phone rang. Dennis jumped, grabbing it. Maybe it was Kate. No, the caller ID showed a colleague, Chris. Hello, Dennis. Hey, how you feeling after last night? Chris's cheerful voice grated on his nerves. Fine. Listen. I just wanted to say you were on fire last night, especially that toast about your youthful mistake. The whole room was dying. To be honest, I thought later, I hope Kate wasn't offended. She's always so quiet. I felt a little awkward, actually. Dennis froze. The toast. A youthful mistake, he remembered. Yes, he'd said that. He'd raised his glass, made a joke about Kate. Everyone laughed. It had seemed witty, clever at the time. And Kate? What was Kate's reaction? He tried to remember her face at that moment, but all he could recall was the laughter, the applause, the clinking glasses. Chris, I have to go, he snapped and hung up. The toast, the joke, a youthful mistake. The writing on the mirror, mistake corrected. It all clicked into place. Dennis covered his face with his hands. God, could it really be because of that? Because of a stupid joke? No, that was ridiculous. Everyone laughed. It was just a toast, just words. She couldn't have done this over something so small. But she had. Dennis got up and started pacing the apartment again. He had to do something. Find her, get her back, explain. She couldn't just walk away with everything. He grabbed his laptop, opened social media. Kate's profile. Her last post was a photo of a sunset from a week ago. He sent her a direct message. Kate, call me immediately. We need to talk. Message sent. It wouldn't be read. He could feel it. He opened a search engine. Typed, how to find someone who left the country. A flood of links. Private investigation agencies, legal consultations. He clicked on the first agency, found a phone number, and called. Sphinx Investigations. How can I help you? I need to find someone. My wife. She went to Italy, to Milan. Understood. You can come to our office to fill out the paperwork. Our international search services start at $10,000 with a 50% retainer. $10,000? Dennis choked. I don't have that kind of money. She took everything. Then I'm afraid we can't help you, sir. Have a good day. The line went dead. Dennis threw his phone back on the couch and screamed in frustration. No money. She took it all. How was he supposed to find her without any money? He sank to the floor, his back against the couch, breathing heavily, a burning sensation in his chest. For the first time in his life, Dennis felt completely helpless. Everything was collapsing. No money. His wife had fled. Even his car. Wait, the car. Dennis scrambled to his feet and ran to the entryway. The key rack was empty. The car keys were gone. He ran out of the apartment, leaving the door open, and bolted down the stairs, bursting outside to the parking garage. His silver sedan, his pride and joy purchased last year, was there. Dennis ran to it, yanked on the door handle. Locked. But Kate had the keys, and the title, most likely. He ran back up to the apartment, tore through closets and drawers, looking for the spare car key. He couldn't find it. He looked for the car's paperwork. Also gone. Dennis collapsed onto the couch, staring at the ceiling. That was it. She had taken everything. Money, documents, the car. She had left him with nothing. The phone rang again. It was Andrew. Den, why'd you hang up? I was thinking, maybe Kate went to her parents' place. She still has her mom, right? Dennis clung to the idea like a drowning man to a raft. Her mom's number, do you have it? I don't think so, but you must have it in your phone. Dennis fumbled through his contacts. Found it. Lydia V., his mother-in-law. He dialed. After several rings, a displeased female voice answered. Hello? Lydia, it's Dennis. Is Kate there with you? Kate? No. Why? She went somewhere. I can't find her. There was a pause. Then his mother-in-law's voice turned to ice. She left, did she? I wonder why that could be. I don't know. That's why I'm asking if she came to you. No, Dennis, she didn't. And if she does, I'll tell her you called, though I'm not sure she'll want to speak with you. What do you mean by that? I mean that my daughter put up with your disrespect for 20 years, and it seems her patience finally ran out. Goodbye, Dennis. The line went dead. Disrespect? What disrespect? He was never disrespectful. He provided for the family, gave her everything. A condo, money, a comfortable life. Dennis hurled his phone against the wall. The screen cracked, but it kept working. He sat on the floor in the middle of the living room, in the empty apartment, and for the first time in many years, he felt tears streaming down his face. Not of self-pity, but of rage, helplessness, and sheer incomprehension. How dare she? How dare she take his money, his documents, his life, and just leave? She had no right, but she did. The account was joint. She had access. The law was on her side. Dennis stood up, went to the bar, and grabbed a bottle of whiskey. He poured a glass, drank it in one gulp. The burning liquid seared his throat, and the pain eased slightly. He poured another, and drank it. He needed to think, to find a way out. But his mind was blank. All he felt was a hollow emptiness mixed with fury. Dennis walked into the bedroom and opened the bottom drawer of his dresser. Under a pile of his t-shirts was an old shoebox. He pulled it out and opened it. Photographs, their youth. Here they were, when they first met in college. Kate in jeans and a sweater, her long hair flowing, laughing. He had his arm around her. They were so young, so happy. Here was their wedding. Small, intimate. Kate in a simple dress, but so beautiful. He was kissing her, and there was so much love in her eyes that even now, looking at the photo, Dennis felt a pang in his chest. Here they were, in their first apartment, sitting on the floor among boxes, laughing. She was looking at him as if he were the center of her universe. When had that ended? When had he stopped being the center of her universe? Or was it that she had stopped being important to him? Dennis flipped through the photos, and with each one, memories flooded back. How they had dreamed about the future. How they had planned for children, yes. They had wanted kids once. But then he said, let's wait until I'm on my feet. And then, now's not a good time. And then he just stopped talking about it altogether. How Kate had supported him when he was just starting his career, staying up with him all night while he prepared presentations. How she believed in him when he didn't even believe in himself. And what had he given her in return? Money? A condo? A car? Vacations? But love? Respect? Attention? When was the last time he'd asked her how she felt, what she was thinking, what she was dreaming about? Dennis remembered how, 6 months ago, she'd suggested a trip to the mountains. He'd refused. A project was more important. He remembered how, a year ago, she'd wanted to go back to work. He'd ridiculed the idea. His success was more important. He remembered how she cooked his favorite meals, greeted him with a smile, never argued, always supported him. And he had called her a mistake, in public, for a laugh. Dennis closed the shoebox, shoved it back in the drawer, and went to the window. Outside, it was a normal Saturday. People were walking, living their lives. And his life had just shattered into a million pieces. And he realized it wasn't she who had made a mistake, it was him. He had made a mistake when he started taking her for granted, when he stopped valuing her, when he decided she would never leave because she was used to it, because it was comfortable, because she had nowhere else to go. But she had left, and she hadn't just taken the money, she had taken 20 years of his life with her and shown him that for all that time he had been an empty shell. Dennis sat on the windowsill, staring out. For the first time in years, he felt truly alone. And for the first time, he wondered if he could get it all back. But how do you get back a person to whom you gave nothing but contempt after they gave you 20 years of their life? Kate stood at the window of her Milan apartment, a cup of cappuccino in her hands. Beyond the glass was a view of the old city's narrow streets and terracotta rooftops. In the distance, she could see the spires of the Duomo. The morning sun filled the room with warm light, and for the first time in years, Kate felt she could breathe deeply. A week had passed since her arrival. For the first few days, she simply walked through the city, wandering aimlessly, ducking into small cafes, sitting on park benches, and watching people. She needed time to process that this was real, not a dream. She had really left. She was really here, thousands of miles away from her old life. Her phone had been ringing off the hook all week. Dennis called from different numbers. She didn't answer, just blocked them one by one. Then came the messages on various apps, which she also didn't read, only saw the notifications. "Kate, call me. We have to talk. You had no right. Give the money back immediately." She deleted all the messaging apps, leaving only her email in case something truly important came up. But Dennis hadn't written there yet. Kate sipped her coffee, tasting the thick foam. The cappuccino here was completely different from what she was used to, stronger, richer, with a slight bitterness. Yesterday, she had stopped by a small cafe on the corner of her street. The air inside smelled of fresh pastries. Behind the counter stood a woman in her 50s, plump, with gray hair pulled into a messy bun and kind brown eyes. "Buongiorno," she greeted Kate with a wide smile. "Buongiorno," Kate replied hesitantly. "Cappuccino, per favore." It was almost all the Italian she knew. The woman nodded and started making the coffee while Kate sat at a table by the window. A few minutes later, a cup with perfect foam appeared before her, along with a croissant on a plate. "I didn't order the croissant," Kate said in English. The woman waved her hand. "A gift. You are new in the neighborhood, yes? I see you walking past for a few days." Kate nodded in surprise. The woman sat down at her table. The cafe was empty. "My name is Julia. This is my cafe. I have been here for 20 years. I'm Kate. I just arrived. On vacation?" Kate paused, then shook her head. "No, I'm starting over." Julia looked at her intently, a flicker of understanding in her eyes. "Ah, capisco. I understand. I too started over once. 20 years ago, I ran away from my husband. He drank. He hit me. He thought I was his property. I took my daughter and left Sicily for here, for Milan. No money, no job, just one suitcase." Kate froze, her cup halfway to her lips. "And how did you manage?" "In many ways. First, I worked as a waitress, then a dishwasher. Then I saved, learned to cook. After 5 years, I opened this cafe. It is small, but it is mine. My daughter is grown now, with her own family in Rome, and I am here, happy." Julia smiled. "You know what was the hardest part?" "What?" "To believe that I deserved to be happy. For years, my husband drilled it into my head that I was worthless, that I would be lost without him, and I almost believed him. But then I realized it is better to be lost than to live with someone who does not value you." Kate felt a lump form in her throat. This stranger seemed to have read her entire story in her eyes. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what, Kara?" "For sharing that. I needed to hear it." Julia patted her hand. "Come again. You will be my guest while you settle in. If you need help, just ask. We women must help each other." From that day on, Kate visited Julia's cafe every morning. They talked. Julia told her about life in Milan, taught her Italian phrases, and gave her advice on where to go, where to buy groceries cheaply, and which language courses were best. And now, a week after her arrival, Kate stood at her apartment window, feeling that her life was beginning to piece itself back together. She had enrolled in an intensive Italian course 3 hours every day. The class was full of other foreigners, a guy from Brazil, a girl from Japan, an older couple from Germany. They had all come for their own reasons, all starting new lives, and no one asked too many questions. During the 3rd class, the instructor, a young Italian man named Luca, asked everyone what they did for a living. "I'm a programmer," said the Brazilian. "I'm a student, studying art," said the Japanese girl. When it was Kate's turn, she hesitated. I'm an interior designer." The words sounded uncertain. She hadn't worked in her field for 20 years. But Luca simply nodded. "Bene, there is much work for designers in Milan." After class, the Japanese girl, a petite young woman with short black hair, approached her. "Hi, I'm Yuki. Are you really a designer?" "I used to be," Kate admitted. "I haven't worked in a long time. Do you want to get back into it?" Kate thought for a moment. Did she? 20 years ago, it had been her dream. Then the dream had died, suffocated by domestic life, Dennis's career, and her own resignation. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "Maybe." "You know," Yuki said, "I have a friend who works at a small design studio here. They're looking for an assistant. Maybe you should give it a try?" Kate's first instinct was to refuse. She wasn't ready. She hadn't worked in so long. Who would hire her? But then she remembered Julia's words. "The hardest part is to believe that you deserve to be happy." "Okay," she said. "Thank you. Can you give me their contact information?" Yuki wrote down the number and address of the studio. Kate went home and stared at the business card for a long time before finally dialing the number. A woman with a pleasant voice answered, introducing herself as Alessandra. "Yes, we are looking for an assistant. Can you come in for an interview tomorrow?" "I don't speak Italian very well," Kate warned her. "No problem, we also speak English here. Come at 2 o'clock. Kate arrived the next day at 2 on the dot. The studio was in an old building with high ceilings and enormous windows. The air smelled of paint and wood. Sketches of interiors hung on the walls, and samples of fabric, tile, and wallpaper were displayed in a corner. Alessandra turned out to be an energetic woman in her 40s, with a short haircut and bright lipstick. "Tell me about yourself," she requested, seating Kate at a table. Kate gave her the short version, omitting the painful details. Her education, a little work experience 20 years ago, a long break. "Why the break?" Alessandra asked. "Family," Kate answered simply. "But now I'm ready to come back." Alessandra nodded, not prying further. She pulled out a folder of sketches. "Look at this. A client wants to update her bedroom. What would you suggest?" Kate took the sketches and studied them. The room was small, with north-facing windows and little natural light. She thought for a moment, and suddenly, ideas began to flood her mind, as if something dormant had awakened after a long slumber. "I would use light colors," she began slowly. "White, beige, maybe some pastel accents. A large mirror opposite the window to reflect the light. Minimal furniture to avoid clutter. Natural textiles, linen, cotton, and definitely live plants. They bring a room to life." Alessandra listened, nodding. "Good. And what if the client loves dark colors? Then you could do one dark accent wall, a deep blue or emerald green, for example, but keep everything else light, otherwise the room will feel oppressive. And lots of lighting, wall sconces, a floor lamp, maybe some LED backlighting." Alessandra smiled. "You say you haven't worked in a long time? It doesn't seem like it. You have a good sense of space. When can you start?" Kate blinked. "You mean, you're hiring me?" "Of course. We're a small studio, we don't pay a lot, but the projects are interesting. Does that work for you?" "Yes," Kate breathed. "Yes, of course." She left the studio feeling a strange lightness in her chest. A job. She had a job again. Something of her own, earned, independent of Dennis, his money, and his opinion. Her first day of work was 3 days later. Kate arrived at 9 a.m., and Alessandra immediately immersed her in the work, showing her current projects, explaining her tasks, and introducing her to her colleagues. There were only 3 of them. Alessandra, a young man named Marco who did 3D visualizations, and now Kate. The work was exactly what she had once dreamed of. They met with clients, discussed their wishes, created sketches, and selected materials. Kate had forgotten what it felt like to be useful, to be needed, to see the results of her labor. Her first solo project was a small one, designing an apartment for a woman who had recently divorced and wanted to refresh her living space. "I want nothing to remind me of the past," the client said at their meeting. "I want everything to be fresh, new, mine." Kate understood her better than anyone. She designed the space in light colors with bright accents, yellow pillows, turquoise curtains, fresh flowers. When the renovation was complete and the client saw the result, she burst into tears. "This is exactly what I needed," she said, hugging Kate. "Thank you. You didn't just create a beautiful interior, you helped me feel like I can start over." Kate went home that day with the feeling that her life had finally found its meaning. Days turned into weeks. Kate worked, studied Italian, and explored Milan in the evenings. She discovered the city's hidden gems, small piazzas where musicians gathered at dusk, antique shops with incredible finds, parks where she could sit on a bench with a book. One Saturday, she was sitting in Sempione Park, reading a book in Italian, still with difficulty, using a dictionary, but reading nonetheless. A man in his 50s with glasses, graying hair, and a kind face sat down on the bench nearby. He took out his own book and settled in. After a while, he noticed Kate's book and smiled. "Dante, you're reading?" "Brave." Kate blushed. "I'm trying. It's not going well." "Don't worry. Dante is difficult even for Italians. Are you new to Milan?" 2 months. They struck up a conversation. The man introduced himself as Marco, an art history professor at the local university. He told her about Milan, its history, its hidden jewels that tourists usually miss. "Did you know there is a secret vineyard right in the center of the city?" he said. "And the Poldi Pezzoli Museum? It has a stunning collection of paintings, but it's almost always empty, unlike the Brera." Kate listened, smiling. Marco was an intelligent, interesting conversationalist. There was no pressure, no attempt to impress her. He simply shared what he loved. They agreed to meet again, just to walk and see the city. Kate didn't think of it as romance. It was just a pleasant acquaintance, a friendship. That was enough for her. But Dennis hadn't given up. 3 months after she left, an email arrived. Kate stared at it for a long time before finally opening it. "Kate, I realize I was wrong. Forgive me. I didn't appreciate you. I acted like a bastard. But I want to fix everything. Please come back. We can start over. I'll change, I promise. I need you. Without you, I've realized how alone I've been all these years. Give me a chance." Dennis. Kate read the email twice, then closed her laptop. She sat by the window, looking out at the evening sky over Milan. Once, those words would have meant everything. Once, she would have clung to them like a life raft, believed that he could really change, and gone back. But she knew better now. People don't change. Dennis had simply lost his comfortable life, his convenience, his money. He didn't miss her. He missed what she provided: stability, comfort, unconditional support. Kate opened a new email and wrote a short reply. "Dennis, you called me a youthful mistake, and I agree. The mistake was tolerating disrespect for 20 years. The mistake was giving up myself for you. The mistake was thinking that love is when one person gives and the other only takes. Thank you for the lesson. I've finally learned it. Don't write to me again. Live your life. I'll be living mine." Kate hit send and felt the last heavy weight lift from her soul. Another 3 months passed. Kate settled into the rhythm of her new life, a job that brought her joy, a language she was beginning to master. Friends: Julia from the cafe, Yuki from her class, Alessandra and Marco from the studio. And Professor Marco, with whom she spent weekends walking, visiting museums, drinking wine in small trattorias, and talking about everything under the sun. One evening, they were sitting at a cafe in a piazza. Autumn was setting in, the air was crisp, and leaves rustled underfoot. Marco was talking about his work, his students, when he suddenly asked, "Kate, may I ask a personal question?" "Yes, of course." "Are you happy?" She thought about it. Was she happy? She didn't have a husband, her old life, the stability she'd had for 20 years. But she had a job she loved. She had friends. She had the freedom to choose how to live, what to do, who to be with. "Yes," she answered, "I am happy. For the first time in many years." Marco smiled. "It shows. When we first met, you were like a closed book. Now you've blossomed." Kate finished her cappuccino and looked out at the piazza. People were strolling, laughing, living their lives. And she was a part of this life, not as Dennis's shadow, not as the wife of a successful businessman, not as a youthful mistake. Just Kate, a designer who builds homes for people. A woman who started her life over and didn't regret it for a single second. Her phone vibrated, an unknown number. Kate glanced at the screen, debated whether to answer, then hit decline and blocked the number. The past was in the past. The future was here, in this city, in this life she had built for herself. "You know, Marco," she said, returning to their conversation, "I've realized something. Self-respect is more valuable than any amount of comfort. It's never too late to start living authentically. And most importantly, you can't let anyone else define your worth. You have to know what you're worth yourself." Marco nodded. Wise words, and you are living proof that they work. They sat for a while longer, finished their coffee, and then went for a walk through the evening streets of Milan. Kate walked beside Marco, and for the first time in a very long time, she felt not like a part of someone else's life, but like a whole and complete person in her own right. Somewhere out there, Dennis was probably still trying to figure out what happened, still angry, hurt, maybe even suffering. But that was no longer her problem. Her problem was learning to live in a new way, to enjoy the small things, to value the people around her, to build a future without looking back. And she was succeeding. Kate stopped on a bridge, looking at the reflection of the city lights in the water. Marco stood beside her, silently admiring the view. Milan at night was beautiful. "Thank you, Dennis," Kate thought, "for showing me who I didn't want to be, for pushing me to change, for calling me a mistake." Because it was in that moment that I understood the only mistake I had made all those years was betraying myself. I will never do that again. Not ever. The wind tousled her hair. Somewhere in the distance, music was playing. The city was alive with its evening energy, and Kate smiled, looking toward the future, because that future, at long last, belonged